So a very good afternoon and welcome back to another video. Today we've come down to the coast and we're going to do some long exposure seascapes with my Olympus EM-10 Mark II. I do love long exposure photography and I do love being by the coast. I also love this micro four thirds camera, so today I have a good feeling. And there is one very killer feature of this camera that I want to have a play with, and I'll explain that to you in just a little while. But for now, let's get the first photograph set up, let's get a composition worked out, and let's start doing some long exposure photography with my Olympus EM-10 Mark II. So I'm opting here to use a 10-stop ND filter. It's a very bright sunny day, the middle of the day, so in order to get reasonably long shutter speeds we're going to need a reasonably strong filter. I do have a 16-stop filter in the bag, but we're going to crack that one out a little bit later on. But for the first shot I think we're just going to use this 10-stop filter. So I've got the composition lined up, I've got the filter in place, let's take the photograph. I had to do a little bit of fettling around here. I needed to put a polarizer on. There is this puddle, this pool. I'm using it as a foreground interest and there was a bit of glare coming off it, so I just wanted to remove that. So I've thrown the polarizer on and we're all good to go. So we've got a polarizer on, a 10-stop filter on, f11, ISO 200. Here we go with a 20-second exposure.
Caught behind Venetian blinds, had to reach for the city lights. This ain't where I belong. Hey, look at me, man, what I become.
Alright, so I come down to this location 3 or 4 times a month. I come here quite regularly and I never come this far out at low tide. In fact, I very rarely come down at low tide, if I'm being honest with you. And what I've come across is these clumps of mud sticking out of the sea. And I thought they made a really fun foreground interest leading off to the wind farm off in the distance. So I've put a 6-stop ND filter on. I'm not using the 10-stop this time, I'm using the 6-stop ND filter because we're able to get some waves and some swells and everything rolling around all of this mud. A mistake a lot of people make with long exposure photography is they think they need to throw the 10-stop filter on straight away, flatten all the water out, get all the streaks in the sky. And it doesn't always give the most interesting looking images. So a lot of the time I tend to stick with a second and a half, 2-second exposures, and it really just retains some of the texture and some of the fun and all the water that's going to swirl around this mud. So let me show you what I'm talking about. We'll get stuck in and we'll take this photograph. Alright, so down here is all the mud that I've been talking about, okay? So we're going to use this as the foreground interest with the wind farm off in the distance. So I've got a 6-stop ND filter on the front of the camera, like I've said. We've got a polarizing filter on just to take some of the glare off of the wet mud. The camera is still set at f11, ISO still set at 200. So let's look at shutter speed and take this photograph. So the shutter speed I've selected here is one third of a second, so just under a second and a half. I'll focus right on the mud down there. Let's go, 2-second timer, and let's see how this image turns out. Okay, so like I was saying at the start of this video, this camera has one cool feature, one killer feature that I really think is going to elevate my long exposure photography, and it's something called lifetime. I want to give a big shout out to Sophie in the comments section of my previous video for pointing this out to me. And it appears like it's a bulb time that gives you a live preview of your photograph as it's being taken. You see, I do a lot of long exposure photography, and using long ND filters, or strong ND filters should I say, the exposure calculators can sometimes be a little bit hit and miss, and it's a little bit of trial and error involved in getting the exposure right. But I think using the live preview on the back of the camera, or probably on my phone today because I don't actually have a remote shutter for this camera, it's going to enable me to see the preview of the exposure, and I'll be able to stop the exposure when it looks right to my eye, which should take a lot of trial and error out of doing this, which I suppose is going to make my long exposure photography an awful lot better. So I've got a subject in mind for this. There's some posts a little bit further down the beach, so I think we're going to get down there and we're going to have a play with this lifetime feature on the back of this Olympus EM-10 Mark II. So these are the posts that I was talking about taking a photograph of, and boy, has the wind really picked up. It is so windy down here right now. So the idea here is we're going to throw a big filter on, the 16-stop filter, We're going to use the live timer mode on the phone. The best way I'm going to be able to demonstrate this to you, I think, is to record the phone screen as I'm taking the photograph. I think that's about the only way I'm really going to be able to demonstrate this. But yeah, posts, long exposure, let's go. Alright, so here we go. So I've started the screen recording so you can see the image that's being recorded. So I'm going to throw the big filter on. Everything's focused, so we're at f11 again, ISO 200. I guess it's time to start this thing going. So here we go, let's see what happens. So I've got the camera set to update every 8 seconds, I believe it was. So hopefully in a few seconds we'll start to get a preview on this screen. There we go. So it's now displaying one of 24 images. So here's a bit of a time lapse, and let's see what happens. Alright, so I'm going to concede that first attempt was probably not the best photograph. I'm a little bit concerned of the waves and the wind right now, but I've set the camera going again and I've updated the display count to update every 15 seconds. As you can see in the previous photograph, it turned off around 3 minutes and 10 seconds. I stopped the photograph around 3.5 minutes because I couldn't really tell what it was doing too much. But we're still going, we're at 6 photos in, 2 minutes of exposure time, and this is great. It really is just giving me a live exposure so I can see when to stop it. This feature is going to be an absolute game changer for my long exposure photography. On days where, well, the wind isn't blowing quite so much and I'm not quite so paranoid about a camera in the water down there. But I'm going to leave it going. I'm going to see how this photograph ends up and I will show you the final result. But I really do like this live time feature. It's going to be a game changer for my photography. Alright, so that final image ended up running exactly 5 minutes. That's where I left it. Obviously, I was using the phone screen to do this. It would have probably been a lot easier if I had the remote shutter for the Olympus camera so I could do it all in camera and see it on the LCD screen. But as an introduction to the feature, man, am I sold on that. That is going to make my long exposure photography so much easier in the future. Being able to see your long exposures being built in real time in front of your eyes, it is absolutely game changing for what I do. I am so sold on this micro four thirds format right now. Alright, so that was just one of the killer features that somebody pointed out to me with these Olympus cameras. If you know of any more, please let me know down in the comments below in case I'm missing something that may make this kind of photography an awful lot easier. So thank you very much for watching today's video. I do hope you have enjoyed it. If you did enjoy it, please do give it a thumbs up because it really does help the video out and it brings new viewers to see my content. If you liked it more than that, you can hit the subscribe button below me for more micro four thirds content in the future. I'm going to love you and I'm going to leave you and I'm going to say peace and goodbye.